Great. Let's give everyone another second to join. All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm thrilled to welcome you to this session where we're going to explore how synthetic labor is transforming business operations and creating new opportunities for scalability, reliance, and workforce empowerment. This is a critical topic for enterprises looking to stay ahead in today's fast-changing landscape. And be sure to stay tuned until the end of this webinar for an exciting opportunity. Not only do you get a chance to schedule a free consultation to explore how these strategies can work for your organization, but you'll also be entered to win a pair of AirPods Max. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and available for later viewing on demand. And please add your questions into the question window at the bottom of the screen at any time. We'll address them at the end. To guide us through this exciting discussion, I'm pleased to hand this over to Gary. Gary, take it away.
Thank you, Pam. And I'm guessing the AirPods are there in case our other offer doesn't get taken up and wanting to speak further with me. Anyway, welcome everyone. Very glad you joined us here this Thanksgiving week. And this is an interesting topic, right? Because I think this gets outside of typically maybe a product type of a discussion, which many of you maybe come to expect. It's really meant to create some thinking around what the importance of synthetic labor can do. I call it the 3R's because it's a big mnemonic, and I think based on my age, I remember back to a different time when the 3R's represented reading, writing, and arithmetic. But maybe just to level set here, why I think of the 3R's and I think of synthetic labor and what it can do for organizations. The formation of that thinking really goes back to the PwC annual survey of CEOs. Now, this is the most recent one. There will be another one coming out. It should be in about 2 weeks now, I think. They typically come out in the middle of December. But what's interesting is when I look at what it is that we'll be able to accomplish with synthetic labor, and I don't think it's an if, it's a when, right? It's a new source of labor. But the PwC and several others have said that 2024 going into 2025 is going to be a big inflection point. We'll look back and see that it was just that. There's AI that occurs in terms of the AI to power rather work and workforce. I think some of it really boils down to the need to reinvent the business model really comes about because of a couple key things. In an increasing population on the planet, we can't keep up with the work that actually needs to be done. And the pool of applicable qualified applicants actually is a shrinking one. And the competition to get very good resources to do the work is very difficult. There's other things, human burnout, and you'll see that shortly. But I point back to this to say, this is really where the shift is going. And this, what PwC is expressing here as the business model reinvention occurs is that AI will increasingly be used to power it. I think we all struggle a little bit with what that looks like. From our point of view here at Knowledge Lake, we view the killer use case of AI to be white collar labor, right? The actual division of labor between humans, right? And this new work source that we refer to as synthetic labor. And as if to put a finer point on this, right? We believe it's not selling ROI to the executives or to the board or to the stockholders. It's selling the ROR, the return on reinvention. Fully 45% of the CEOs, there was 4,700 of them that were interviewed for last year's survey through PwC. 45% of them said that their company won't be viable in 10 years if they stay on their current path of the way they work and the way they're doing things. They need to reinvent, and I'm certain that's happening. If it's happening in half of those respondents, it's happening probably in many of your businesses where it's not the technology as technology for automating things for humans. It's actually automating the processes that exist within your company that run the organization, whether it's company or government, it's all the same. So the 3R's really represent this pivotal change in work accomplishment from Knowledge Lake's point of view. And for those of you old enough to remember, this Think logo actually harkens back to the dawn of a different computing era. This was what IBM used to express about. It was really intended as an internal campaign for their salespeople and their systems analysts to think about the business that you're helping your client reinvent at the dawn of the mainframe. So this is kind of an appropriate thing. It's just we look at it as rethink, and it's got parallels to what IBM was espousing then. So getting into the 3R's, right? Reimagining. What do I mean when I say reimagining? So if we go back to that think placard that IBM used as an internal campaign to get their people on a different path, this was the advent of the people, process, and technology that we've now come to know and that we've worked off for many, many decades. It's the basis on which the processes of an organization have evolved and been built around, right? There's the people, there's the actual workflow process, and then the technology needed to support the people, or maybe even in some cases support the process through workflow. That has outmoded, right? We now find ourselves in a very different era with things like AI, and we have systems that are just very, very different. They're not about assisting humans in a conventional sense. They are a standalone pool of labor on their own, and they have some of the intellect to actually accomplish this. So you don't need to think of single source labor as human only. There's a lot of things also that I think are opportunities to change how the processes get imagined, because a synthetic laborer will work very differently than a human, right? Machines don't, they can open up 1,000 spreadsheets simultaneously and look at a value and work with that, whereas humans would have to go through that serially. So the way that some of these constructs will occur, they're going to be different and much, much more efficient, right? And these are typically things that we see either organizations struggling with growth because the immediate reaction is I've got to get more humans, which is typically a very, very expensive and time-consuming act because you've got to bring them in, train them on your processes, get them up to speed. Some will wash out, some will be really good, right? There's a lot of risk in that old model. So the reimagine for us is so much around growth, or maybe you're a retailer right now and Black Friday, which I guess has been occurring the last couple of weeks, surprisingly. Black Friday, as we know it, the day after Thanksgiving, it's upon those retailers, and there's a lot of extra labor that's required, not just on the human side at the store level, but certainly in many other areas in the back office. So when we talk about repatriating, it's been a very common function since the 90s, really, to outsource and offshore for the benefit of cost structure within an organization. Our belief is much of that work being done by a lot of humans, and there's a lot of turnover in many of these shops. There's language barriers, there's time zone barriers, there's geopolitical implications. If you look at the strife that's occurring right now between the Philippines and China, actual naval vessels from China ramming Philippine Coast Guard vessels, these things belie a reality that could see some risk in having employees that are now over in the Philippines, for example. And it's not a centralized quality of work, it's a centralizing quality of work rather than commoditizing it to get it down to its least cost factor. The least cost factor is great when we only had that as an alternative, but now that you can repatriate those processes, own them, and they're spread across the globe, really backed up on a platform, that's really, really where we see things going and where our clients have been heading. In fact, we see best in world doing it exactly that way, because not only does it reduce the cost of labor further than an offshore equivalent, it works 24/7 in a manner that even with human offshore, they can't quite accomplish that. The mistakes get removed, so you have a substantially increased quality of work, and you're maintaining the organizational mission really through the installation of the work process, right? And if there's one thing that really kind of sets the tone for any organization, it is the organizing principle in our worldview, which means it's the actual work product output that a company achieves. That is its organizing principle. It's the people you hire, it's the processes that you're constantly working on to modify, whether it's applying Six Sigma to it. That organizing principle has moved into a new era, right, through synthetic labor. And the measure of that value using synthetic labor compared to a people-only work capability will actually bring a lot of market change. It'll improve competitiveness. And in fact, we think it will change how some players emerge maybe as leaders in their category where they once weren't. It'll kind of re-level the playing field. And you can see that to an extent in the image to the left. It's meant to invoke feelings of what the or the thought of rather what the org chart is. If you look at it, it's effectively saying that any structured organization, whereas these roles were all once filled by humans, they'll be filled by humans, and some subset of them will be filled by synthetic labor. You know, things like mistake-prone work that's boring, that take away a lot of time for humans to be doing the higher value add things like working with other humans or human clients, things where inventing new product or new ideas really take the forefront. We will free up human time to do those tasks, which humans do so very, very well, that don't require their focus on it. And then, of course, the last R is relief. And this is a really, really hot topic right now, as I'm sure you all are reading about or seeing or hearing or experiencing firsthand. There was an Upwork study that came out during the summer. I think it was in June or July. And it was of 2,500 knowledge workers talking about what AI has done to their job. And unfortunately, it is not what any of us thought it would do. It was actually very different. The BBC did a nice summary of this Upwork study. So if you have a chance, I've referenced it down below. They did an article on the 22nd of October summarizing it. But basically, 77% of the employees that they surveyed, right, over 2,500 knowledge workers, say AI has actually decreased their productivity and added to their workload. We actually see this in our customers and prospects that we speak to. The other component of it is that at the executive level and the board level, what they're seeing is it's not providing the return. And I think it's because AI is thought of as a thing that an individual employee will actually deploy to make themselves more efficient. I kind of liken this to the first generation of automation in RPA. It was really more about the individual worker or maybe a departmental level. Synthetic labor is really focused on an enterprise grade construct, right? And that's a big difference in thinking because the individual is actually making more work for themselves by asking ChatGPT or Claude from Anthropic, asking questions, getting more data back and having to do that much more work. Whereas if you're letting a synthetic laborer do that, right, it's a very different construct because they'll get the answer, they'll know what they need to do to work on that body of information that they've just received. So it really kind of flips the equation on its head. And that's one of the reasons that we deeply believe the killer use case for AI is white collar work. And again, you can see in the second point of the 9,615 knowledge workers throughout, these are some of the largest first world economies that exist. Average usage of 6 to 15 different apps in the workplace. And there's so much communication going on and there's so much data coming in from these AI-based functions within the applications that they're missing messages and notification. In short, they're being so distracted they can't really conduct the work that's necessary to completing their job, right? And that not only burns them out, it will actually have a deep impact on the company. And we've gotten things to a state as an organization where we're actually having machines build machines, right? So we're utilizing machines to build out what we call hints, or said another way, the prompt engineering, because machines work differently than humans. And again, it's all in an effort to take this work away from humans and shield them from it, or abstract it away, so that they get the benefit of the AI, but they don't get the negative aspects of additive work. So what does it look like in the organization? I've borrowed this slide from Scott Klosowski, who's a futurist. Many of you may be familiar with him. If you don't know him, his podcast is absolutely worth listening to. Just look up Scott Klosowski. I've put it down below. Scott has a very, very similar view to what Knowledge Lake's view is about digital disruption, because the disruption of bringing in these capabilities is pronounced. And if you think about it, people and organizations evolve linearly, right? Just think about your own life. You don't typically take these peaky approaches to things. And computers moving into the internet and now into synthetic intelligence has been more of a hockey stick. And it's created this technical debt gap between our expectation and what the capability is. And so the full use capability of some of these tools or platforms, right, like synthetic labor, it doesn't get adopted in a manner that's befitting what capabilities it returns, right? So we actually stay on the lower end of the spectrum. And this is why when we think about things like return on investment, you really have to inspect that statement carefully, because we move away from a return on investment and we move toward a return on reinvention of work and the work tasks that the organization has to accomplish to deliver whatever value set it is that they promise to their customers. So looking at that rate of change, it's just right now, it's just so hyper intense that people aren't adapting it, nor are the organizations. Well, in our view, you remove a lot of that risk when you start to think differently about how you're going to deliver your work. And really, I put this up here just as kind of a thought around, don't look at this the old way of how we measured things, right? You've heard me steering away from things like return on investment. You've heard me steering away from things like automations, because it really is truly a labor source that you're introducing. Likewise, this arena has typically been the domain of advisory consultancies that have deep experience in the organizing labor components to accomplishing work output. Here's the thing: it would be very easy to rush to that judgment. Many of them we're not seeing get there. And I think it's one of the things that we've been seeing, in fact, is that there's a rejection of a lot of the services that they've traditionally provided, because they aren't incorporating a lot of the newer emerged capabilities in how to work, right? Like synthetic labor. And so when you think about it from the context of being an inventor of a labor platform, a lot of times that might threaten the status quo across the board. And that's a reasonable reaction. I think that the inspection around it, though, is to think of this as a labor as a service. Things will change, but it won't be in the way that it's this, Skynet type of a emergence. And the discussion that has to occur around what this isn't exactly a demo either, because it's very difficult to show you your work in flight with a synthetic laborer. What I would say is, think about the work processes and the things that you're looking to change about your organization, and then consider it more in a manner of what maybe can I hive off, because any work that a human's doing, for the most part, can be accomplished by a synthetic laborer. It's not necessarily the creative work. You wouldn't hive that off to them, but it's really the stuff that represents, I've got to go into these systems, get this information, and do these tasks. That's where synthetic labor can radically alter the way in which you're addressing the work product output of your organization and its overall mission. So two examples, maybe to tie this together and make it a little bit less nebulous for you, that I hope will happen. These are two clients. I can't name them because of NDAs, but one is an educational institution, and they're changing the very fabric of administrative work within the university. And what's interesting about this is there's a notion, or there's actually a measure in universities called HEPI, HEPI, and it's Higher Education Price Index. And for the last 30, 40 years, this has been running very, very high, and it continues to do so. It's the equivalent of the Consumer Price Index. It is what drives tuition. And one of the things that comes out of that number is that universities are conducting way too much administrative work utilizing humans that could be achieved by synthetic labor. So we have a university client, and they are utilizing us for things like financial aid applications, transcript management, and transcript leveling of applicants coming in from high school, leveling out the grades, doing that in an automated fashion. Not only does it save them a lot of money, it saves them the labor associated with that. That lowers their overall higher education price index, right? That's an important factor for them. And certainly, while financial aid and transcripts are only two pieces of it, they are going through the entire organization and eliminating the administrative work. And in some cases, the headcount around it, because sometimes the headcount is brought in simply as a function to accomplish that. But they're reinventing how they're doing the work, right? So it's one of the 3R's, and it's core to their mission on getting things to a point where they can get their arms around it, because it will ultimately, the expectation is, either level off tuition or maybe reverse the trend of increasing tuition and drive it down, right? That will make them more appealing. It will open up the audience of people that can afford then to attend that particular university. The second example I'd like to use is a manufacturer, and they are not just a manufacturer, but they do their own chemical invention of product, right? So they're not just manufacturing something; they're inventing the product on the front end. There's a lot involved in what they do. One of the main things that can impact their business is their ability to manufacture their product. And there's a number of things that they have to go through, both from a regulatory perspective as well as from an operational safety perspective of the product. And those things have typically done traditionally by humans. It's humans walking around, they've got a clipboard, or they may have an iPad, and they're actually checking on certain things. And it's almost like a clock station. They go there on a prescribed basis, and they say, "Yep, this is working okay," or "No, I'm resetting this because this line, is at a point now where cleaning has to occur for the next half hour." They've taken that, and they are effectively automating much of the background in it by having a human have to conduct a lot of the work around these policies. So what this is doing for them is there's less people walking around the factory. They've improved their uptime, and they've got now an audit trail that is much, much more intense in terms of the data that's incorporated in it. The other thing is, if there's any exceptions, it's smart enough that it knows to route it to a particular approval chain that may incorporate more than just a manager seeing it, but it might go up to the plant foreman, or maybe even above the plant foreman and to the SVP of manufacturing, so that all the right eyeballs are on this without somebody going back, sitting down and writing an email, calling someone. This is all going on in the background in real time to make their operation more efficient. So those are two hopefully decent examples of how these two different industries, these two different players in those industries, are reconsidering what they're doing and how they're doing it. And they're doing it in an effort to not have to hire a new headcount. They're doing it in an effort, in some cases, to right-size the labor force that they've got doing it, so that they can change the value proposition of their cost to their end user, in the case of the university students, and make themselves a little bit more appealing on an economic scale. So we get, one question that we get all the time is, well, how is this different than RPA? And it's an important question because I think a lot of times thinking about RPA, it was automating things that were either individual in work steps or maybe departmental, best case. There were a lot of organizations that did the departmental thing very, very well. But RPA was very much work automation 1.0. Work automation 2.0, which is really where synthetic labor lives and what it's done, is it has changed things in a very, very meaningful way. So it's incorporated elements that RPA never could quite get to because of the availability of technology and what the state of the art was at the time. And one of the core things in that is workflow, right? That workflow orchestration layer is critical, not only to the synthetic workers that are contained within the actual workflow, but also the humans that might be required to either quality check something, or maybe it's kicked out for an exception, or maybe it's simply that the synthetic worker says, I think I've got this correct. I just want you to double check me, right? And that workflow is a critical component because it might be more involved than simply having it follow the typical path. But regardless, automation 2.0 is really focused on the whole workflow element of it. This enables a best labor source based approach, or what we would consider a best practice to who does the work, right? Again, under the 3R's, it's the reimagining, because humans may no longer be the right source for the best labor source, especially if you think of some of the work that you do where you've got humans that are very smart and overqualified to do certain things that they're doing because there was previously no alternative. With the alternative of synthetic labor, this allows you to do that. And again, it works. The workflow is really what's enabling that. Synthetic labor doing end-to-end work as a governable but independent function. Many of our customers are beginning to do that. They want to go end to end. They don't want to have any human intervention if it's possible on certain specific identified tasks where they know that the speed and not having a human in it because it's not really required is a very important check mark for them. Unstructured data. This is a debatable thing, but for the most part, RPA didn't have any mechanism to incorporate this, which was to say that most organizations utilizing RPA were leaving 70 to 80% of the available data out of the equation, right? And it was always kind of like a holy grail to get to. Again, the new work automation and synthetic labor for us incorporates this. Forms, the data governance and then the intuitive AI. These are, again, they're kind of table stakes to the way that we work around these things, and they're not typically an incorporated or integrated part of an RPA platform. So just a very different way of doing things and thinking of work. I think if you read through these, you'll start to understand that it's the integrated aspects and all of it working together as a common function that really makes synthetic labor so much more powerful, right? It's just moved it. It's moved it ahead a generation at least. So I guess with that, Pam, my that really is it for my comments. And I know you've got this exciting offer, so why don't I hand things back over to you?
Yeah, great. Gary, thank you so much. I love the 3R's. It really is a great way to explain the value of synthetic labor. So don't forget, reimagine, repatriate, and relief are the 3R's that we're talking about today. We also want to open this up, a free offer for a consultation. As Gary said, it really is about having that business discussion and understanding what the needs are for your specific business. So please reach out. You can email me directly, or there's an attachment link that you can click and fill out a form, or you can also scan this QR code on the screen. Currently, we'll actually leave up the QR code while we go through some Q&A. so that you have a time to kind of scan it and fill that out. And again, the great offer for a raffle for AirPods Max if you fill out the form or if you email me. So don't hesitate to reach out. And again, please put your questions in the window below. With that, I think we can start answering a couple of questions. Sound good, Gary?
Yeah, that sounds real good, Pam. I wish I was eligible for the I wish I was eligible for the AirPods.
Great. So we've got a question here. How does Knowledge Lake enable seamless deployment of synthetic labor solutions, minimizing IT complexity while maximizing operational efficiency?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's our interface is very much geared toward a business user. So less on the IT dependency side because there's no coding that's really involved, and we've done that with an intent, right? Everybody knows the terms no code, low code, and that's exactly the path that we follow. So very much a drag and drop graphical interface for an organization's business analysts to really create on the fly the workflow that they need. And it's exactly that. It's a workflow that abstracts away all of the underneath and underpinnings that somebody might normally do.
Great. Just a reminder to go ahead and add your questions at the bottom. And again, scan that QR code and fill out our form. Here's another question. What differentiates Knowledge Lake's approach to AI-driven document processing and workflow automation in creating a sustainable, scalable labor model?
Yeah, this comes back. It's interesting. This comes back to one of the things we were just talking about a moment ago. AI, as you know, the killer use case for us for AI is labor, right? It's actually knowledge worker work. I think that's one of the components that differentiates us is that we've got that understanding that's in our heritage. We're utilizing AI to do just that in the background. In fact, often what many of our customers are now telling us is we actually represent their first real win in AI. It's not just a tool that we're allowing individuals to use just to ask questions and get information back. We're incorporating it into a synthetic worker that can take that out of the hands of a human and free the human up, right? It comes back to that relief. Don't burn the humans out. use the synthetic laborer to do all that work, which is what they're built to do. But I think the other component of it too that differentiates us is it is the incorporation of unstructured data into the equation, which, if you think about it, conservatively, even if it's 50% more data than just having structured data, the answer sets that you'll get, the capability that you'll get out of all that additional data will reveal a much richer, deeper, more meaningful output, really to the organizational mission. So I think those would probably be the biggest two things that I would point to. And then again, the workflow, it's that ability it's the ability to bring all of it together, not just the work of a human or the work of a synthetic laborer, but it's the data that appends to that work, right? Some of us are familiar with the term ECM or as it's called now, content services. That content services is deep in our heritage, and part of what we're able to do with our content services background and understanding is append the right data to the right work motions. So all of it goes hand in glove, making a much more efficient process and really ensuring a lot more success in the outcome.
Great, Gary. Here's another question. Very appropriate. Can I get a business meeting with a sales rep? Of course you
Yes.
can.
Yes. 1,000 times yes.
Again, please feel free to scan that QR code or email me directly. We are here to meet with you. Gary will set up a consultative call and talk with you at your convenience.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Pam. And maybe really to put a finer point on it, happy to work through just even the thinking if you're in the early stages of trying to understand, hey, I've got these processes or I have my people doing this work. I think it could be a candidate. What do you think? We're happy to have those discussions because the field is constantly evolving, right? And the rate of change, it can be overwhelming. We see a lot more on a daily basis, obviously, because we're involved with it across hundreds of our customers and inbound calls from prospects. So happy to work through any of that, and even if it's just a thinking session.
Great. One more question is coming through. How does Knowledge Lake support businesses in identifying high impact areas for synthetic labor integration to ensure a smooth and effective start?
Yeah. In fact, through conversations, typically what we do, there's not really a lot of magic to it. It's taking a lot of the existing processes that create the most pain for the organization. So maybe another way to think of it is, what work would you get rid of if you could get rid of it? For your team, for yourself, for your bonus, for a promotion? What would that be? And then that is sometimes a great starting candidate pool of some of the functions that can be automated. One of the things that we find with that approach is it also is a more native way to think about how you currently do work. So it doesn't necessarily involve getting, having a 6-month assessment done of what could be automated. It's really taking it on in much more of a practical approach of, we know these processes get a lot of mistakes and errors in them, and it costs us a lot of money. Or, healthcare is a great example of this. Doctors and nurses filling out insurance codes to the insurer because that's how they get reimbursed. I don't know any doctor that went to medical school to figure out how to, understand the insurance code and enter that into an online form. They really went to school to save lives and improve life quality. These are things that become, and they're obviously very, very easy examples, but within your organization, that's an easy process to step through. And we provide tools and thinking around that to really help you kind of take a different view on things and rethink one of the R's, right? Rethink what is actually being done in that component of work.
Great, Gary. Thank you so much. We'll hang on here for another second to see if there are other questions coming in and to allow folks to access that form. Go ahead and fill it out. Again, for that free consultation, we can also use your documents for a customized demo. While you're having these conversations with Gary, it's good to see it actually at work. So don't hesitate to reach out. Let me look one more time. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but please don't hesitate to reach out with those questions in the future. And Gary, thank you so much for this really informative webinar. It was great.
Thank you. Yeah, this was great. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving and have a great rest of the day. Thanks,
Thank
Gary.
you. Bye-bye.